Picture this thousands of years ago. A merchant in ancient Mesopotamia presses a reed into wet clay, leaving behind a series of wedge-shaped marks. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Human thought became permanent. This wasn't just a receipt for a shipment of grain, it was the birth of writing. The moment our ancestors cracked the code to preserving ideas across time and space. Without this breakthrough, our world would be unrecognizable. No literature, no science, no records of kings or empires, just whispers lost to the wind. But how did we get from those first clumsy symbols to the alphabets we use today? The story of writing is a tapestry woven with ingenuity, power, and the relentless human drive to communicate. From the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates to the Nile's fertile delta, ancient civilizations faced a common challenge: how to keep track of goods, laws, and stories in societies growing more complex by the day. The solutions they invented, cuneiform, hieroglyphs, and other early scripts, weren't just practical tools. They were revolutions disguised as scratches on stone and clay. Think about it, these systems didn't just record transactions, they allowed pharaohs to command armies, priests to preserve prayers, and poets to capture the first epics. Writing became the backbone of civilization, the invisible thread stitching together empires across millennia. And yet, each system had its own personality, its own quirks, some as intricate as art, others as efficient as a ledger. What's truly astonishing is how these ancient scripts still echo in our lives today. The symbols you're reading right now, they're distant cousins to those early marks made by scribes under the desert sun. Over the next few minutes, we'll unravel how writing evolved from simple tallies to elaborate alphabets, how it spread like wildfire across continents, and how it shaped the fate of nations. We'll meet the unsung heroes, the accountants, priests, and scholars who turned writing into an art form. And along the way, you'll discover why something as mundane as a tax receipt could change the course of history. So settle in, because this isn't just a story about letters and symbols. It's the story of how humanity found its voice. The need for writing began not with poetry or philosophy, but with something far more practical: grain. Picture the bustling markets of ancient Sumer around 5,200 years ago, where merchants traded barley, wool, and pottery in quantities too vast to remember. Fingers and memory were no longer enough. Someone had the brilliant idea to press a reed into soft clay, marking how many jars of oil changed hands. These humble scratches, early cuneiform, weren't art. They were inventory lists, the ancient equivalent of a spreadsheet. But in that moment, something revolutionary took shape. For the first time, information could outlive its creator. Governments quickly realized writing's power. As cities grew, rulers faced a dilemma: how to enforce laws when spoken words could be denied or forgotten. The solution: carve them in stone. Take the Code of Hammurabi, etched in towering basalt around 1750 BCE. Suddenly, justice wasn't just a king's whim, it was permanent, visible to all. If a man destroys the eye of another, the stone declared, his own eye shall be destroyed. Writing turned abstract ideas into unshakable truth, binding societies together under shared rules. Religion fueled the fire. Priests in Egypt needed precise ways to record rituals honoring the gods. A misplaced prayer might anger Osiris or Ra. Hieroglyphs began as sacred carvings on temple walls, blending symbols and sounds to preserve spells for the afterlife. The famous Book of the Dead wasn't just a text, it was a passport to eternity, filled with instructions only writing could safeguard across generations. But here's the twist: these systems didn't start as full languages. Early cuneiform was just pictographs. A drawing of a sheep meant sheep. Over centuries, those pictures simplified into abstract wedges that could also represent sounds, letting scribes write names or emotions. In Egypt, a hieroglyph of an owl might mean the bird itself, the sound M, or even a concept like darkness, depending on context. Writing wasn't born perfect. It evolved through trial and error, shaped by the daily needs of accountants, lawyers, and priests. The true genius of these early systems, their adaptability. The same cuneiform that tracked taxes in Ur was later used to write the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's first great story. What began as a tool for counting jars of wine became the vehicle for literature, science, and history. That's the paradox of writing's origins. It was invented for receipts, but gave us receipts of the human soul. Imagine holding a damp clay tablet in your hands, pressing the tip of a reed into its surface to create sharp, angled marks. This was the daily work of Sumerian scribes over 5,000 years ago, inventing the world's first writing system, cuneiform. The name itself comes from the Latin word cuneus, meaning wedge, a perfect description of those distinctive triangular indentations. But here's what's fascinating: cuneiform didn't start as an elegant script. Its earliest forms were simple pictures. A drawing of a fish meant fish. A sheaf of barley stood for grain. Over centuries, these pictographs streamlined into abstract wedges, capable of conveying not just objects but sounds, ideas, even emotions. What began as a tool for tracking trade goods soon became the heartbeat of Mesopotamian civilization. Picture a bustling temple in the city of Uruk, where scribes meticulously recorded temple offerings, so many jars of oil, so many sheep sacrificed to the gods. These weren't just administrative notes, they were the first steps toward accounting, law, even literature. Take the famous Epic of Gilgamesh, inscribed on 12 clay tablets. Without cuneiform, this sweeping tale of friendship, mortality, and the search for meaning might have vanished into the mists of time. Instead, it survives as humanity's oldest known epic, a testament to writing's power to transcend generations. But cuneiform's real genius lay in its flexibility. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which remained largely artistic, cuneiform adapted to multiple languages: Akkadian, Babylonian, Hittite. Scribes could use the same wedge to represent a word in Sumerian or a syllable in another tongue. This adaptability made it the dominant script across the Near East for 3,000 years, longer than the Roman alphabet has existed. Kings used it to draft treaties, merchants to record debts, astronomers to track the movements of stars. Even love letters survive, like one from a lonely wife pleading with her absent husband. "Why do you stay so far away? Come home to me." The system wasn't without its quirks. A single symbol might have dozens of meanings depending on context. The sign for foot could also mean to stand or to travel. Learning cuneiform required years of training, turning scribes into an elite class. Schools or tablet houses drilled students in hundreds of signs, punishing mistakes with canings. Yet this complexity couldn't stifle writing's spread. By 2000 BCE, cuneiform tablets ranged from royal decrees to schoolboy doodles, proof that once humanity unlocked writing, there was no going back. What's often overlooked is how cuneiform shaped later alphabets. The Phoenicians, master traders of the Mediterranean, likely drew inspiration from its simplicity when developing their own script. That Phoenician system would become the ancestor of Greek, Latin, and eventually the letters you're reading now. So the next time you jot down a note, remember, you're tapping into a tradition that began with a reed, some clay, and the pragmatic need to count jars of grain. While cuneiform was revolutionizing Mesopotamia, another writing system was taking shape along the Nile, one so mystical it would baffle scholars for centuries. Egyptian hieroglyphs weren't just letters, they were sacred art believed to hold divine power. Picture a temple wall bathed in torchlight, covered in meticulously carved images of falcons, snakes, and ankhs. To the untrained eye, they might look like decorations, but to priests and scribes, these symbols were the voice of the gods themselves. Unlike cuneiform's practical origins, hieroglyphs emerged from ritual, designed to communicate with the divine and ensure eternal life. The system was astonishingly versatile. Some hieroglyphs worked like pictures. A drawing of a sun meant sun. Others represented sounds similar to modern alphabets. A single glyph could even serve triple duty as a word, a sound, or a silent clue clarifying meaning. Take the owl symbol. It might stand for the bird itself, the consonant sound M, or hint that nearby glyphs related to darkness or night. This layered approach let scribes write everything from royal decrees to magic spells with poetic precision. For 3,000 years, hieroglyphs remained virtually unchanged, a rarity in the history of writing. Why? Because in Egypt, tradition was sacred. Altering the script risked breaking its magical connection to the afterlife. When a pharaoh's name was chiseled into a tomb, those hieroglyphs weren't just identifiers. They were spells ensuring the ruler's soul would recognize its body in the underworld. Even the ink held meaning: green for fertility, black for resurrection, red for chaos. Then came the Rosetta Stone, the key to unlocking this ancient cipher. Discovered in 1799 by French soldiers in Egypt, this slab of black basalt bore the same decree in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, a cursive Egyptian script, and hieroglyphs. For 23 years, scholars like Jean-François Champollion painstakingly matched the Greek text to the mysterious symbols. The breakthrough came when Champollion realized hieroglyphs could represent sounds in foreign names, like the cartouches encircling Ptolemy and Cleopatra's names. Suddenly, a language silent for millennia began to speak. What hieroglyphs revealed was breathtaking. Temple inscriptions detailed cosmic battles between Horus and Set. Papyri contained medical recipes and love poetry. Tomb walls promised guides to the afterlife, with spells to avoid demons and pass judgment before Osiris. But perhaps most striking was how hieroglyphs mirrored Egypt's worldview: circular, eternal, where words and images held creative power. To carve a name in stone was to make it immortal. To erase one was to condemn a soul to oblivion, a fate worse than death. This reverence for writing extended beyond the elite. Though hieroglyphs required years to master, everyday Egyptians used a simplified script called hieratic for letters and contracts. Later, Demotic script emerged for business, proving that even in a culture obsessed with eternity, practicality found its place. Yet hieroglyphs endured as the sacred thread connecting the living to the divine, proving that some codes aren't just meant to be broken, they're meant to be revered. Now imagine a script so enigmatic that even after a century of study, its secrets remain locked away. This is the mystery of the Indus Valley civilization's writing system, a collection of symbols etched into tiny stone seals and pottery fragments. Unlike cuneiform and hieroglyphs, which we can read fluently, the Indus script refuses to give up its meaning. Found across what's now Pakistan and northwest India, these markings date back over 4,000 years, crafted by one of the world's first urban cultures, yet we still don't know if they record poetry, taxes, or something entirely unexpected. The symbols themselves are tantalizingly elegant. Picture a square seal no larger than a postage stamp, carved with a unicorn-like creature and a row of precise characters. Some signs resemble plants or tools, others are abstract geometric shapes. Over 400 distinct symbols have been identified, suggesting a system complex enough to represent language, not just simple pictographs. But here's the catch: without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual inscription to bridge the gap, every attempt at decipherment has hit a wall. Scholars are deeply divided. Some argue the symbols are a full writing system, pointing to patterns that resemble grammatical structure. Others counter that it might be proto-writing, a mix of clan markers, religious icons, and trade notations, never meant to form sentences. Then there's the fringe theory that it's not language at all, but an elaborate system of property tags or ritual symbols. The debate grows heated because cracking this code could rewrite history. Were the Indus people in contact with Mesopotamia? Did they leave behind hymns or laws we're failing to hear? One clue lies in the uniformity of the script. From the shores of the Arabian Sea to the foothills of the Himalayas, these symbols appear nearly identical across a vast region. That kind of consistency hints at centralized control, perhaps scribble schools or a powerful elite dictating standards. Yet, unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, no grand monuments or royal inscriptions survive. The Indus civilization seems to have thrived without obvious kings or temples, leaving its writing as one of the few windows into its social fabric. Technology hasn't given up, though. Recent computer analyses suggest the script shares statistical features with known languages, fueling hope that it's decipherable. But until someone unearths a longer text, a clay tablet with an epic, a treaty, anything beyond brief seal inscriptions, the Indus script will keep its secrets. And that's part of its allure. In a world where so much ancient knowledge feels settled, here's a puzzle still waiting to be solved, a reminder that history isn't always a book to be read. Sometimes it's a locked door and we're still fumbling for the key. Deep in the royal courts of China's Shang dynasty, over 3,000 years ago, a priest holds a scorching hot bronze rod against a turtle shell. As the shell cracks with a sharp pop, the sound isn't just noise, it's the voice of the ancestors. These cracks, carefully interpreted, might reveal whether the king should wage war, if the harvest would flourish, or why the queen's illness persisted. But what made these rituals revolutionary wasn't just the divination. It was the meticulous carvings left behind, questions etched in ancient script. Will there be disaster? Is the rain coming? And alongside them, the answers fortune tellers read in the fractures. These oracle bones, as we now call them, became the cradle of Chinese writing, preserving humanity's earliest dialogues between the living and the divine. The symbols themselves are strikingly recognizable. A modern Chinese reader might not understand the exact phrasing, but they'd spot familiar shapes. The character for rain still looks like droplets falling from a cloud. Mountain still peaks like a range. That continuity is staggering. While cuneiform and hieroglyphs faded, oracle bone script evolved directly into today's characters, making Chinese the oldest writing system still actively used. But here's what's fascinating. These early characters weren't just practical. They were sacred, a bridge between heaven and earth. Kings relied on them not to track taxes, but to commune with gods. Archaeologists digging near Anyang in the early 20th century unearthed thousands of these bones, some still blackened by fire. The inscriptions reveal a world where every natural event, droughts, eclipses, childbirth, was a message from the spirit realm. One bone asks if the queen's toothache was punishment for neglecting an ancestor. Another records a diviner's urgent plea. In 10 days will there be calamity? The cracks replied yes, and sure enough, the next line notes a devastating storm arrived on schedule. Whether coincidence or belief, these records show how writing began as a cosmic hotline. Yet beneath the mysticism lay innovation. Early characters were pictographs. A horse was a horse, a fish a fish. but soon scribes combined symbols to express abstract ideas. The word good paired woman and child, bright stacked sun and moon. This creativity allowed the script to grow beyond simple images into a flexible tool for recording history, poetry, and law. By the Zhou dynasty, inscriptions on bronze ritual vessels celebrated military victories and royal decrees, proving writing had outgrown its ceremonial roots. What's often overlooked is how these bones shaped Chinese culture's reverence for language. Even today, calligraphy is art, and characters carry layers of meaning lost in alphabets. The word for crisis blends danger and opportunity. Family combines a roof and pigs' wealth under one shelter. This isn't just writing, it's philosophy in ink. And it all traces back to those smoky divination chambers where priest kings sought answers in the cracks of turtle shells, unknowingly laying the foundation for a script that would outlast empires. Now picture a bustling Phoenician port around 3,000 years ago, where sailors from across the Mediterranean haggled over bolts of dyed purple cloth and jars of olive oil. In this whirl of commerce, a revolution was taking shape not in goods but in how they were recorded. The Phoenicians, master traders of the ancient world, did something radical. They stripped writing down to its bare bones. Forget hundreds of complex symbols. Their new system had just 22 simple letters, each representing a consonant sound. No pictures, no layers of meaning, just pure efficiency. This was the birth of the alphabet, and it would change how humanity communicates forever. What made the Phoenician script so groundbreaking was its simplicity. Unlike Cuneiform's wedges or hieroglyphs' intricate symbols, their letters were easy to carve on wood, scratch into wax, or paint on pottery. A merchant could learn it in weeks, not years. The letter Aleph, letter 109000, looked like an ox's head. Bet, letter 1090, one like a house, mnemonic shapes rooted in everyday life. But here's the genius, these weren't pictographs anymore. The ox head didn't mean ox, it stood for the glottal stop at the beginning of the word. This shift from representing objects to capturing sounds was like inventing a linguistic skeleton key. Unlock one script, and you could adapt it to any language. The alphabet spread like wildfire along trade routes. Phoenician ships carried it to Greece, where scribes tweaked it to include vowels, birthing the Greek alphabet. That system traveled to Italy, morphing into Latin letters. Even Arabic and Hebrew scripts trace their lineage back to those 22 Phoenician characters. Imagine the A on your keyboard started as an ox's head scratched onto a cargo manifest. But why did this particular system dominate? Geography played a starring role. Phoenicia's coastal cities, Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, were crossroads of commerce. Every ship that loaded cedar wood or glass in their harbors carried the alphabet like intellectual cargo. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where writing was controlled by priests and kings, Phoenician script belonged to the marketplace. It was democratic, practical, and perfectly suited for recording contracts, inventories, and treaties between cultures. The real surprise, we found Phoenician inscriptions as far as Spain and the Atlantic coast of Morocco. One potsherd dug up in Cyprus bears a merchant's note about a delayed shipment of wine, written in a hand so casual it could be a modern text message. That's the alphabet's unsung superpower. It turned writing from an elite art into a tool for everyone. From love letters scratched on broken pottery to laws carved in stone, the Phoenician invention made literacy portable, adaptable, and unstoppable. A quiet revolution inked onto the pages of history by traders who just needed to keep track of their goods. Long before the Greek alphabet we recognize today, the Mycenaean civilization used a script so cryptic it would take millennia to decode linear B. Picture a clay tablet from 1400 BC, inscribed with symbols resembling stick figures and abstract shapes. These weren't letters but syllables, a clunky system designed to tally amphorae of olive oil and chariot wheels in palace storerooms. Linear B was all business, with no room for poetry or philosophy. And then catastrophe struck. The Mycenaean palaces burned, their scribes vanished, and for 400 years, Greece entered a dark age without writing. But when literacy re-emerged, it didn't return as a bureaucratic tool. It came back as a revolution. The spark, a chance encounter between Greek traders and Phoenician sailors. Around 800 BC, someone in the bustling ports of the eastern Mediterranean had a stroke of genius. Take the Phoenician alphabet's sleek consonants and adapt them to Greek. But here's the twist: Greek had vowel sounds, Phoenician didn't, so they repurposed unused letters. The Phoenician aleph, letter 10900, which originally stood for a glottal stop, became alpha, representing the R sound. Bet, letter 10901, morphed into beta. For the first time, a writing system captured every nuance of spoken language, from the breathy H in Helios to the resonant O in Olympus. This wasn't just an alphabet, it was a sonic mirror, reflecting speech with startling precision. Suddenly, ideas could travel farther than ever. Homer's epics, once passed down orally by bards, were written down, preserving Achilles' rage and Odysseus' cunning for eternity. Civic life transformed too. In Athens, laws carved on stone steels ensured transparency. Any citizen could read the rules of democracy. Philosophers like Plato could debate in the agora, then refine their thoughts in writing. Even theater exploded, with playwrights scripting tragedies performed for thousands. The alphabet's simplicity made literacy accessible beyond priestly elites. A fisherman's son could learn his letters as easily as a noble's. What's often overlooked is how Greek tweaked the script's aesthetics. They introduced geometry to writing, standardizing letter heights and spacing. The rounded elegance of epsilon and omega mirrored the symmetry of Greek architecture. This visual harmony turned text into art. Witness the flawless inscriptions on the Parthenon's frieze, where every character aligns like columns in a temple. Yet the true legacy lies in the alphabet's adaptability. Greek letters could transcribe foreign names, map constellations, or solve equations. When Euclid wrote Elements, his proofs relied on letters labeling geometric shapes. The very word alphabet is a tribute to its origins. Alpha plus beta, the first two letters teaching the world that knowledge, once set in writing, could outlast empires. High in the jungles of Central America, the Maya perfected a writing system unlike any other, where art and language fused into one. Imagine standing before a towering limestone stela, its surface alive with intricate glyphs depicting jaguars, gods, and celestial events. To the untrained eye, it might look like decoration, but every swirl and face tells a story. These weren't mere symbols, they were portals to a civilization's soul, blending image and text so seamlessly that reading them felt like stepping into a painted manuscript. What made Mayan glyphs extraordinary was their dual nature. Some signs represented whole words, like a carved serpent meaning sky or divinity. Others stood for syllables, allowing scribes to piece together names and verbs like a linguistic puzzle. A single glyph block could contain multiple elements: a main sign, prefixes, suffixes, all arranged to be read in a specific order. Picture it as a visual crossword where direction mattered, left to right, top to bottom, in paired columns. And unlike the rigid strokes of cuneiform, Mayan script flowed with artistic grace, each glyph a miniature masterpiece. For centuries, these carvings were a mystery, dismissed as mere ornamentation by early explorers. Then, in the 1950s, a teenage Russian prodigy named Yuri Norizov made a breakthrough. Using a rare manuscript called the Dresden Codex, he realized Mayan glyphs combined logograms and phonetic signs, just like Egyptian hieroglyphs. But cracking the code revealed something unexpected. The Maya weren't just recording history, they were obsessed with time. Glyphs tracked celestial cycles down to the day, predicting eclipses and aligning ceremonies with planetary movements. A king's birth wasn't just a date, it was a cosmic event tied to the dance of Venus. Yet the script wasn't all solemn ritual. Scribes infused wit into their work. One vase depicts a drunken rabbit god stumbling over glyphs that mock his antics. Another shows a nobleman's exaggerated sneeze, captioned with playful phonetic puns. This was writing as performance, where form and meaning danced together. Even the act of carving held spiritual weight. Scribes, often nobles themselves, pricked their tongues to mix blood with ink, turning words into literal vessels of life force. The real revelation: how glyphs mirrored the Maya's view of reality. Time wasn't linear but cyclical, with history repeating in grand loops. Glyphs didn't just describe events, they invoked them, weaving past and present into a living tapestry. When a king commissioned a monument, he wasn't just boasting, he was anchoring his reign in the eternal rhythm of the cosmos. Today, as scholars decode more texts, we're not just translating words. We're hearing a civilization speak across the centuries, in jokes, prophecies, and star charts, proof that writing at its best is both record and revelation. Carved into the hilt of a Viking sword or etched onto a towering runestone, runes were far more than just letters. They were conduits of power. Picture a Norse warrior in the 9th century, kneeling in the flickering torchlight as he painstakingly carves the angular symbol Tiwaz letter 16cf into his blade. To him, this isn't just a mark, it's a plea to the god Tyr for victory in battle. Across Scandinavia and beyond, from the shores of Greenland to the rivers of Russia, these stark, straight-lined characters served as both practical tools and sacred incantations. Unlike the flowing curves of Latin script, runes were designed for practicality, easily scratched into wood, stone, or metal with a knife or chisel. But their simplicity belied their depth. Each rune, or runner, meant not just a sound but a secret, a whisper of the divine. The oldest runic alphabet, the Elder Futhorc, emerged around the 2nd century CE among Germanic tribes. Its 24 characters weren't arranged randomly, they followed a sacred order, each group tied to Norse cosmology. The first 6 runes spelled Futhark, giving the alphabet its name. But these weren't just letters, they were keys to the unseen world. The rune, Alges, letter 16C9, shaped like a person reaching skyward, symbolized protection, often carved onto amulets. Rado, letter 16B, one wasn't just the sound, it invoked journeys, both physical and spiritual. Even mundane inscriptions, like a merchant's tally on a wooden stick, carried an echo of the mystical. Vikings believed runes held transformative power. A runestone in Sweden bears a chilling warning. These runes hide a curse. May he who disturbs this grave be plagued by rot. Another, in Denmark, tells a love story. Sigrid raised this stone for her husband, the best of men. But runes weren't just for the dead. A comb unearthed in Norway reads, "Lena owns me," a simple claim, yet proof that literacy wasn't limited to elites. Even women, often overlooked in warrior sagas, wielded runes to mark ownership or weave spells. The legendary Poetic Edda describes the goddess Freyja teaching rune magic to Odin himself, blurring the line between writing and witchcraft. What's remarkable is how runes adapted. As Norse culture spread, the alphabet slimmed down to 16 characters in the younger Futhorc, better suited for Old Norse. Runestones became billboards of their age, announcing victories like King Harald Bluetooth's in Jelling. He won all Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian. Yet even after conversion to Christianity, runes endured hidden in church carvings or used to scribe Latin prayers, a testament to their cultural stubbornness. Today, runes live on in unexpected places. Tolkien borrowed them for dwarven script in The Hobbit. Neo-Nazis twisted their symbolism, though scholars stress runes predate such misuse by millennia. Pagan revivalists still carve them for rituals, and fantasy games recast them as arcane codes, but perhaps their true legacy lies in their honesty. Unlike ornate calligraphy, runes were blunt, direct, like the people who used them. They remind us that writing isn't just about recording words. Sometimes it's about casting a spell across time. In the smoky glow of a Mesopotamian scribble school, a young student winces as his teacher's cane strikes his palm again. He's mixed up the signs for barley and sheep, a mistake that could cost a merchant half his harvest if recorded wrong. This brutal training was the price of joining history's first knowledge elite, the Scribes. Far more than mere clerks, these men, and occasionally women, were the human hard drives of ancient civilizations, mastering scripts so complex that literacy equaled power. In Egypt, scribes boasted, "Be a scribe, your limbs will be sleek, your hands soft." In Sumer, they joked that only a scribe's stylus could outlast a king's sword. The path to becoming a scribe was grueling. In Mesopotamia, students spent years in the tablet house, memorizing hundreds of cuneiform signs by copying and reciting lists, types of fish, categories of pottery, even synonyms for destroy. One surviving school text moans, "I recited my tablet, ate my lunch, prepared my new tablet, wrote it, finished it. Then my teacher gave me lines to copy, and in the afternoon, more lines." Mistakes earned beatings or humiliations like wearing a donkey's yoke. Yet graduation meant entry into a privileged class. Scribes drafted royal decrees, calculated interest rates, and even wrote satire. The Dialogue of Pessimism, a Babylonian text, features a scribe darkly joking with his slave about life's futility, a proof that bureaucracy and cynicism have ancient roots. Egypt elevated scribes to near mythic status. Tomb paintings show them sitting cross-legged with papyrus unrolled across their kilts, brushes in hand. Their tools were elegant, reed pens, palettes holding red and black ink, water pots to thin pigments, black ink for the main text, red for headings, a tradition lasting millennia. One scribe's kit found in a tomb included a grinding stone for pigments and a tiny figurine of the god Thoth, patron of writing. Their training included not just hieroglyphs but hieratic script, mathematics, and diplomacy. A satirical text called The Satire of the Trades lists other professions only to mock them. The potter is covered in mud like a corpse, but the scribe records everyone's work. Privileges came thick. Scribes were exempt from manual labor and taxes, a perk that made the profession hereditary. In one letter, an Egyptian official scolds his son, "I'll make you love writing more than your mother." Some scribes rose to dizzying heights. Amenhotep, son of Hapu, became so indispensable to Pharaoh Amenhotep III that he was deified after death. Women, though rare in scribble ranks, occasionally broke through. In Sumer, Princess Enheduanna composed temple hymns in cuneiform, signing them boldly history's first named author. Yet scribes weren't just record keepers, they were culture's guardians. When Assyrian King Ashurbanipal built his legendary library at Nineveh, he didn't just stockpile tablets. He sent scribes across the empire to copy every text they found. One scribe's note on a medical tablet admits, "I wrote it down from old copies but couldn't understand parts." Even mistakes preserved ideas. A single mathematical tablet from Lhasa shows a student struggling with geometry, his teacher's corrections scrawled beside wrong answers, an ancient show your work moment frozen in clay. Their legacy, the very texts we study today, every epic, tax record, and love poem survived because a scribe carefully pressed stylus to clay or brush to papyrus, bridging millennia with each stroke. They remind us that behind every great civilization, there were quiet figures ensuring its voice would never be silenced. Picture a Sumerian scribe kneading a lump of river clay between his hands, pressing it into a palm-sized rectangle before reaching for his reed stylus. This humble tablet, soon to be baked hard under the desert sun, would outlast empires. Meanwhile, 800 miles up the Nile, an Egyptian scribe unrolls a sheet of papyrus, thin as onion skin yet astonishingly durable. Writing wasn't just about symbols, it was a dance between hand and material, each civilization crafting surfaces as distinctive as their scripts. The Mesopotamians wrote on clay because it was everywhere, mud from the Tigris and Euphrates, mixed with straw for strength. Pressing cuneiform into damp clay created crisp wedges, but mistakes were costly. Once baked, a tablet was nearly indestructible, which is why we've recovered shopping lists from 4,000 years ago that read like yesterday's texts. 30 jars of oil, 12 sheep, payment due next moon. Egypt's innovation was papyrus, made from the pith of Nile reeds sliced into strips, layered crosswise, and pounded into sheets. The result was lightweight, scrollable, and perfect for hieroglyphs flowing brushstrokes. A single scroll could stretch over 30 feet, like the famous Book of the Dead, its vibrant illustrations still glowing after millennia, but papyrus had quirks. Scribes wrote only on the horizontal side, following the grain of the fibers. Mistakes were scraped off with a pumice stone, an early version of hitting delete. The Romans adored Egyptian papyrus, importing so much that Pliny the Elder complained about the cost. Yet in damp climates, papyrus crumbled, which is why so much survives in Egypt's dry tombs but rotted away in Europe's rain. Then there were the wax tablets, the ancient world's notebooks, a wooden frame filled with beeswax, reusable and portable. Roman schoolboys scratched lessons with a stylus, then smoothed the wax for new work. Legal contracts were often written twice, once on wax as a draft, then on papyrus for permanence. You can almost picture a merchant in Pompeii, tallying shipments on his tablet, the wax warmed by the Mediterranean sun. Each material shaped its script. Cuneiform's angular wedges thrived on clay but would have shredded papyrus. Egyptian hieroglyphs, with their delicate curves, demanded the smoothness of reed brushes on papyrus. And when the Greeks adopted papyrus, their alphabet's rounded letters flowed effortlessly across its surface. Even ink recipes varied. Egyptians mixed soot with gum, Arabic for black, ochre for red, while Chinese scribes used lampblack and glue, grinding it on inkstones. The real surprise, how these choices echo today. Our keyboards still tap out cuneiform's quick strokes, our touchscreens mimic wax tablets' erasability, and the scroll lives on in digital form. Every time you jot a note, you're part of an unbroken chain stretching back to that Sumerian pressing marks into mud, proving that writing isn't just about words, it's about the stuff that carries them through time. Standing 7 feet tall in the heart of Babylon, the basalt stele of Hammurabi loomed over citizens like an unblinking judge. Carved in crisp cuneiform, its 282 laws declared, "If a man puts out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out." For the first time in history, justice wasn't whispered in a ruler's ear, it was set in stone, literally. This was the revolutionary power of writing, transforming subjective rulings into permanent public standards. But Hammurabi's code was more than legal text, it was political theater. By inscribing laws where all could see, kings demonstrated that order flowed from the script itself, not just their whims. The genius lay in consistency. Oral traditions allowed laws to shift with retellings, but written codes ensured a merchant in faced the same penalties as one in Nineveh. Standardization became governance's backbone. When Hittite kings drafted treaties with Egypt, scribes produced identical copies in both languages, early diplomatic backups. One such treaty, etched in hieroglyphs and cuneiform, swore peace between Ramses II and Hattusili III, complete with divine witnesses. Let the 1,000 gods of Hatti and Egypt observe these words. Writing turned promises into cross-border bonds enforceable by gods and kings alike. Yet writing's grip on power went deeper than legislation. Scribes recorded tax rolls with meticulous precision, turning harvests into measurable wealth. A single Sumerian tablet from Lagash lists 12,886 bushels of barley received from the temple of Ningersu. Such records birthed bureaucracy and empire's memory. No longer reliant on fallible human recall, rulers could audit officials, track resources, and squash rebellions with data. The Assyrians took this further, maintaining detailed archives of provincial yields. One clay tablet warns a governor, "Why is last year's tax short? The palace has the records." Religious authority intertwined with the written word. Egyptian pharaohs claimed divine right through hieroglyphs, their names encircled in cartouches like sacred locks. Temple inscriptions didn't just describe rituals, they were rituals, the very act of carving invoking God's presence. When Akhenaten broke with tradition to worship Aten, he didn't just smash statues, he ordered scribes to chisel out Ammon's name from monuments, erasing the god from history itself. Control the script and you controlled reality. The dark side, writing excluded as much as it organized. Legal codes often favored elites. Hammurabi's laws punished commoners more harshly than nobles for identical crimes. Literacy became a class barrier. Only the educated could navigate legal texts or challenge interpretations. A Mesopotamian proverb warned, "A scribe's hand is a lion's paw, crushing the unwary under bureaucracy's weight." Yet for all its flaws, writing's role in governance was irreversible. From Roman edicts posted in forums to Magna Carta's inked seals, the pattern held. Once words could outlive their speakers, power would never be the same. Deep in the vaulted temples of ancient India, priests chanted verses so sacred they were called Shruti, that which is heard. For centuries, the Vedas passed orally from teacher to student, each syllable preserved with exacting precision. But around 500 BCE, something changed. Fearing the loss of these hymns to time, scholars began etching them onto palm leaves and birch bark, transforming whispered wisdom into tangible scripture. This moment, repeated across cultures, marks a turning point in human spirituality. When the divine word moves from memory to manuscript, it gains immortality. The Vedas weren't alone. Consider the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a guide to the afterlife painted on papyrus and tucked into tombs. Spells that once depended on a priest's recitation could now speak for themselves, ensuring the deceased's safe passage even if no one survived to chant them. Or the Zoroastrian Avesta, its hymns so revered that scribes wrote them in gold ink on oxhide scrolls. Writing didn't just record religion, it became religion's body, a vessel sturdy enough to carry faith across generations. Then there's the Bible, whose journey from oral storytelling to codified text reshaped half the globe. The Dead Sea Scrolls, hidden in Judean caves for 2 millennia, reveal how scribes painstakingly copied Isaiah's prophecies letter by letter, their errors sometimes corrected in margins by later hands. Each scroll was a covenant with the future, a promise that David's Psalms or Jesus' parables would outlive empires. The Quran's compilation was even more urgent. After the Prophet Muhammad's death, his followers scrambled to preserve revelations once memorized by heart. The result, a text so precise that today, a Quran in Cairo matches one in Jakarta syllable for syllable, a unity oral tradition alone could never guarantee. What's often overlooked is how writing altered belief itself. Oral religions thrive on flexibility. A story shifts with each telling, adapting to new listeners. But ink fixes doctrine. The Hindu concept of a P, a U, R, U, letter 1, E, 6, 3, E, Y, R, authorless truth, meant the written Vedas were seen as eternal, unchangeable as the gods themselves. Jewish scribes who copied Torah scrolls followed rules so strict that a single misshapen letter could render the entire document invalid. This reverence for the physical word birthed traditions like the Islamic art of calligraphy, where copying the Quran became an act of worship. Yet writing also sparked conflict. When translations made scriptures accessible like Jerome's Latin Vulgate Bible, it challenged clerical authority. The Protestant Reformation leaned heavily on Gutenberg's printed Bibles to bypass papal interpretation. And today, when archaeologists unearth Gnostic Gospels excluded from canonical texts, we're reminded that writing doesn't just preserve faith, it curates it, deciding which voices endure and which fade to dust. Perhaps the most poignant example lies in Tibet, where monks still grind gold and precious stones into ink to transcribe Buddhist sutras. Each stroke is a meditation, the text itself a sacred object. In these acts, we see writing's ultimate alchemy, turning human marks into something holy, proof that the divine speaks not just through thunder or burning bushes, but through the quiet scrape of a pen across parchment. On a windswept Pacific island, a wooden tablet covered in cryptic glyphs stares back at researchers like a locked door. This is Rongo Rongo, the mysterious script of Easter Island, and its secrets have defied decoding for centuries. Carved in reverse boustrophed alternating lines written in opposite directions, the symbols resemble humans, plants, and bizarre geometric forms. Some believe it's a form of proto-writing, a memory aid for chants or genealogies. Others argue it's a full writing system, pointing to glyphs that repeat in patterns suggesting grammar. But without a bilingual inscription or living descendants who understand it, Rongo Rongo remains one of linguistics' greatest puzzles. What's haunting is the context. These tablets were found amid the ruins of a collapsed society. Their creators long vanished after exhausting their island's resources. The script isn't just undeciphered, it's a cautionary tale in a language we can't yet read. Far to the west, the Etruscans of Italy left behind over 13,000 inscriptions, yet their language feels just out of reach. We can sound out their alphabet adapted from Greek letters and recognize words for wine, vinum, or goddess, tyran. But without lengthy texts like poetry or histories, their worldview stays fragmented. Tomb paintings show vibrant banquets and ominous underworld demons, while bronze liver models inscribed with divine names hint at intricate rituals. The Etruscans taught Rome everything from architecture to augury, yet their books, praised by Roman scholars, crumbled to dust. Only a single gold plaque survives with a bilingual Etruscan Phoenician dedication, a tantalizing whisper of what was lost. Their script outlived their political power, etched onto mirrors and jewelry long after Roman conquest, a ghostly persistence of identity. Then there's the Voynich manuscript, a 15th century codex brimming with alien plants and nude women bathing in green liquid. Its curling script, unlike any known alphabet, has resisted even military cryptographers and AI. Carbon-dated pages confirm its medieval origin, but theories range from an elaborate hoax to a lost Central European dialect, the most heartbreaking possibility. It could be a women's cipher, like the encoded recipes and remedies Italian noblewomen shared to skirt patriarchal oversight. If so, it's a rare voice from history's silenced half, taunting us with its unreadable secrets. What unites these scripts is their stubborn silence. Linear A, used by Minoans centuries before Greek, left accounting tablets but no legends. Proto-Elamite, Mesopotamia's neighbor script, abandoned Cuneiform's clarity for abstract squiggles still untranslated. Even when we crack the code, as with Mayan glyphs, gaps remain. Countless texts burned by Spanish priests. These lost scripts aren't just academic challenges, they're cultural black holes swallowing stories we'll never hear. Yet their very existence proves how fiercely humanity fights to be remembered, even in codes no future generation may break. Perhaps the most poignant is the Indus Valley script, etched onto tiny seals buried for millennia. One depicts a horned deity meditating amid animals, flanked by symbols we can't decipher. Is it a king's name, a prayer? Until we know, an entire civilization's voice stays muted, their triumphs and tragedies reduced to guesswork. Every undeciphered glyph is a locked room in history's mansion, reminding us that writing, for all its power, is only as eternal as those who preserve the key. The bustling markets of the Silk Road weren't just filled with spices and silk, they crackled with the sound of scribes haggling over scripts. Picture a Persian trader in Samarkand, bartering not just for jade but for the very tools to record his deals, a stack of Chinese paper, a bamboo brush, and a borrowed Aramaic phrasebook. This was the hidden currency of the Silk Road, writing systems hopping caravans like stowaways, transforming as they traveled. Aramaic, the administrative script of the Persian Empire, became the blueprint for scripts across Asia, from India's Kharosthi to the Sogdian of Central Asia. Even Chinese paper, lightweight and durable, replaced clunky bamboo slips and expensive silk scrolls, turning record-keeping into something portable enough to fit in a saddlebag. Take the case of the Sogdians, middlemen of the Silk Road. Their script, derived from Aramaic, became the lingua franca from Uzbekistan to northern China. A letter survives from a 4th century Sogdian merchant named Nanai Vandak, writing home from Dunhuang. 3 times I've been robbed by bandits, but thanks to the Buddha, my ledgers are safe. His words, in neat Sogdian script, were penned on paper, a technology his ancestors wouldn't have recognized. Chinese paper mills, guarded secrets at first, spread west after the Battle of Tollers in 751 CE, when Arab captors learned the craft from Chinese prisoners. Within centuries, Baghdad's paper factories were supplying scribes from Cordoba to Constantinople, turning parchment into a relic. But scripts didn't just spread, they mutated. The Aigh has adapted Sogdian into a vertical script to mimic Chinese calligraphy, while Tibetan King Songtsen Gampo sent his minister Thonmei Sambhota to India to devise a script for Buddhist scriptures. The result, a flowing alphabet that still writes Om Mani Padme Hum on prayer flags today. Even the humble comma traces its lineage to Silk Road scribes who borrowed the slash like danda from Sanskrit punctuation to mark pauses in Turkic runes. The real game changer was Buddhism. Missionaries carried not just sutras but the very concept of phonetic writing to lands where symbols had once represented whole words. Suddenly, complex ideas could be sounded out, a revelation that birthed Korea's Hangul and Japan's Kana. A 9th century monk's diary found in the Dunhuang caves captures the chaos. Today learned 30 Sanskrit syllables from an Indian trader. Tomorrow, a Aigha merchant promises to teach me his script if I mend his torn manuscript. What's often forgotten is how these exchanges weren't always peaceful. When Mongol armies swept across Eurasia, they didn't just bring destruction, they recruited scribes from every conquered culture. The Aigha scribe Tata Tonga, captured by Genghis Khan, adapted his vertical script for Mongolian, creating a system so efficient it's still used in inner China today. Meanwhile, Persian diplomats at the Yuan court picked up Chinese seal carving, blending it with Arabic calligraphy to create the exquisite Tughra signatures of Ottoman sultans. The Silk Road's greatest legacy might be its proof that writing is never static. Like the caravans that carried it, script thrives on cross-pollination, a Mongolian vowel here, a Greek letter shape there, all smelted in the crucible of commerce and conquest. So the next time you jot a note, remember, your alphabet likely passed through a dozen cultures, each adding their accent to the conversation. In the hush of a medieval scriptorium, a calligrapher dips his reed pen into ink mixed with gold dust, preparing to transcribe a single verse from the Quran. His hand moves with deliberate grace, each curve of the Arabic letters unfolding like a dancer's gesture. This isn't mere writing, it's an act of worship where every stroke carries the weight of divine revelation. Islamic tradition holds that the Quran's words existed before creation, etched into a celestial tablet. To copy them wasn't just transcription, it was a sacred dialogue between human skill and eternal truth. The result, a marriage of meaning and form so profound that calligraphy became known as the geometry of the soul. Arabic script's very design lent itself to this spiritual artistry. Unlike rigid Roman letters, its flowing lines could stretch, twist, and intertwine like vines. The dot below a ba Arabic ba might blossom into a floral motif, while the vertical stroke of an alif Arabic alif could tower like a minaret. But this beauty wasn't arbitrary, it mirrored Islamic theology. Just as Allah's creation balances structure and fluidity, think of fractal patterns in mosque tiles or the spiraling petals of a rose calligraphy, married mathematical precision with organic elegance. Master scribes used strict proportional rules, often based on the first letter, Aleph, to ensure harmony. A single misshapen letter could disrupt the entire composition, much like a false note in a symphony. The styles varied as widely as the lands Islam touched. In Damascus, the angular Kufic script adorned early Quranic manuscripts, its bold lines echoing the stark desert landscapes. By contrast, Ottoman Turkey favored Thuluth, where letters swirled with regal flourishes across imperial decrees and mosque domes. Persia's Nastaliq script dripped like honey, poets like Hafez insisting their verses looked as exquisite as they sounded. Each style had its purpose, Naskh for everyday texts, its clarity perfect for spreading knowledge, while Diwani, with its labyrinthine curves, guarded palace secrets in ornate diplomatic scrolls. Calligraphy's reach extended far beyond parchment. It wrapped around ceramic bowls in Cordoba, climbed the walls of the Alhambra in interlocking plaster, and even shaped the blades of Mamluk swords, Quranic verses etched into steel to bless the warrior's hand. The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem bears a monumental frieze in Kufic, its gold letters proclaiming Islam's message to the sky. This ubiquity wasn't just decoration, it transformed public spaces into open books of faith. A laborer who couldn't read would still recognize the shape of Allah in a tile pattern, feeling the divine presence in geometry. Perhaps the most poignant tradition was the Hilli, an Ottoman art form depicting the Prophet Muhammad's virtues through calligraphic portraits. Since Islam forbade human images of the Prophet, artists instead wrote descriptions of his character in radiant circles, surrounded by verses like a halo. These works weren't just devotional, they were bridges between the seen and unseen, where letters became vessels for spiritual longing. Even today, from Jakarta to Detroit, modern calligraphers chase this same sublime balance, proving that when ink meets reverence, the result is timeless. Imagine a world where every book had to be copied by hand, where a single Bible took a monk an entire year to transcribe, his fingers cramped from dawn till dusk. These handwritten manuscripts were so precious that libraries chained them to desks, and owning even one could cost a nobleman's ransom. Then, in the mid-15th century, a goldsmith from Mainz named Johannes Gutenberg had an idea that would shatter this system forever. But here's the twist. His printing press wasn't the first of its kind. Centuries earlier, in the bustling markets of Tang Dynasty China, artisans were already carving entire pages of text into wooden blocks, inking them, and pressing them onto paper. By the year 868, the Diamond Sutra Buddhist text printed with intricate wood blocks bore a startling colophon, printed for free universal distribution. This wasn't just a book, it was a declaration that knowledge could belong to the masses. The real game changer came in Korea. In the 13th century, Korean scholars grew frustrated with carving new wooden blocks for every text. Their solution, a movable metal-type individual characters cast in bronze that could be rearranged like puzzle pieces. A royal workshop produced the Jikji, a Buddhist document printed with this method in 1377, decades before Gutenberg's birth. Yet, unlike Europe's alphabet, which needed just 26 letters, Korean and Chinese scripts required thousands of unique characters, making the technology cumbersome for everyday use. That's where Gutenberg's genius kicked in. By combining movable type with a wine press mechanism and oil-based ink, he created a system so efficient it could produce 250 pages in a single day. His 42-line Bible, with its crisp Gothic letters, didn't just mimic handwritten manuscripts, it surpassed them in uniformity and speed. The impact was immediate and explosive. Suddenly, books weren't just for monasteries and kings. A student in Paris could buy a printed textbook for the price of a decent meal. Martin Luther's 95 Theses, once nailed to a church door, spread across Germany in pamphlets like wildfire, fueling the Protestant Reformation. Scientists like Copernicus and Galileo exchanged printed letters, their ideas ricocheting across Europe in weeks instead of years. And with literacy came dissent. Governments that once controlled knowledge through scribes now faced pamphlets criticizing taxes or questioning divine right. But the printing revolution wasn't just about speed. It transformed how we think. Handwritten texts were prone to errors, each copy drifting further from the original like a game of telephone. Printing froze words in time, creating standardized references. For the first time, two scholars in different countries could debate the exact same sentence, down to the comma. Dictionaries, encyclopedias, and atlases emerged, organizing knowledge into systems rather than scrolls. Even punctuation evolved. The semicolon, invented by Venetian printer Aldus Manutius, gave writers a way to pause between a comma's breadth and a period's finality. What's often overlooked are the quiet casualties. Illuminated manuscripts with their gold leaf and cobalt blues became luxuries rather than necessities. Scribes who'd spent lifetimes mastering calligraphy found their skills obsolete, and some argue that printing's uniformity erased the personal touches of handwritten marginalia, those doodles, jokes, and angry rants scribbled by bored monks. Yet for every loss there were gains. The printed word became a great equalizer, seeding revolutions from the Enlightenment to the American colonies. When Thomas Paine's Common Sense sold 500,000 copies in 1776, it proved that ideas once set in type could topple empires. Today, as we swipe through e-books, it's easy to forget how radical the printing press once was. But next time you underline a passage or dog-ear a page, remember, you're participating in a tradition that began with inked metal and a simple, revolutionary idea. That knowledge shouldn't be chained to a library desk, but set free in the hands of anyone who dares to read. In the cramped alleys of Warsaw's Jewish ghetto during World War II, a teacher risked her life to scribble Hebrew letters on a scrap of smuggled paper. Around the same time, in a Korean village under Japanese occupation, a grandfather secretly taught his grandchildren the curves of Hangul, a script their rulers had banned. These weren't just acts of defiance, they were battles for identity, fought with ink and memory. Writing systems have always been more than tools for communication. They're vessels of culture, armor against assimilation, and sometimes acts of rebellion. Few stories capture this better than the resurrection of Hebrew, a language that lay dormant in sacred texts for nearly 2,000 years before being revived as the living tongue of Israel. Scholars like Eliezer ben Yehuda didn't just compile dictionaries, they mined ancient scriptures for forgotten words, coining terms like glida for ice cream and ophaneum for bicycle, stitching a biblical language into modern life. Hebrew's revival wasn't just linguistic, it was a declaration that a people scattered across continents could reunite through the script of their ancestors. Equally remarkable is Korea's Hangul, invented in 1443 by King Sejong the Great. Frustrated that classical Chinese characters kept literacy locked away from commoners, Sejong designed Hangul to be so logical it could be learned in a day. The shapes of its consonants mimic speech organs, a Hangul kugi ya, enus. G/K mirrors the tongue's position at the roof of the mouth. Yet when Japan colonized Korea in the early 20th century, Hangul became a clandestine act of patriotism. Banned from schools, it thrived in underground newsletters and church hymnals, a silent protest against cultural erasure. Today, Hangul Day celebrates not just a script, but the survival of a nation's voice. Then there's Sequoiah's Cherokee syllabary, born from sheer determination. A silversmith who spoke no English, Sequoiah spent 12 years crafting 86 symbols to preserve his people's language. By 1821, Cherokee newspapers rolled off printing presses in a script their own ancestors wouldn't have recognized. When the U.S. government forced Cherokee children into boarding schools designed to erase their culture, those who secretly knew the syllabary passed notes under desks, turning writing into resistance. Similarly, the Bamum script of Cameroon, developed by King Njoya in the 1890s, wove local proverbs and history into its characters until French colonizers burned his printing press. Yet today, activists resurrect it as a symbol of African intellectual heritage. What unites these scripts is their role as cultural lifelines. During the Soviet era, Kazakh and Uzbek languages were forcibly switched from Arabic to Latin, then Cyrillic alphabets, severing ties to Islamic literary traditions. Yet after independence, Kazakhstan announced a return to Latin script, not just for practicality, but to reclaim a pre-Soviet identity. Even in diaspora, scripts hold power. Yiddish, once written in Hebrew characters, developed its own typographic soul, with fonts that carried the cadence of Ashkenazi speech. Meanwhile, the Maori in New Zealand fought to revitalize their written language, carving meeting houses with ancestral proverbs as living assertions of sovereignty. The lesson: oppressors have long understood that controlling a people's script means controlling their memory. But from the Cherokee to the Maori, the response has been the same. To write is to exist. Every time a child learns Hangul's curves or traces Hebrew's ancient strokes, they're not just memorizing letters, they're keeping a flame alive. In a world where languages vanish every 2 weeks, these scripts stand as testaments to a truth as old as Cuneiform. Words carved in stone or whispered in secret can outlast empires. The Rosetta Stone wasn't just a slab of rock. It was a linguistic time machine waiting for the right mind to unlock its secrets. When Jean-François Champollion finally deciphered Egyptian hieroglyphs in 1822, it wasn't through luck, but through relentless logic. He noticed that oval cartouches on the stone enclosed names Ptolemy and Cleopatra written phonetically in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs. This tiny insight revealed a truth scholars had missed for centuries. Hieroglyphs weren't just pictograms. They were a hybrid system, blending symbols for sounds with those for whole words. Champollion's breakthrough wasn't just about Egypt. It proved that lost languages could be resurrected if you knew where to look. Decades later, another puzzle fell, this time in the ruins of Knossos. British archaeologist Arthur Evans uncovered clay tablets inscribed with Linear B, a script so baffling he spent decades trying to crack it. The key came from an unlikely source, a young architect named Michael Ventris. Ventris, obsessed with code since childhood, noticed recurring word patterns that resembled place names. By cross-referencing these with known Mycenaean geography, he made a daring leap. Linear B was an early form of Greek. Overnight, a civilization that had been mute for millennia began speaking again, revealing inventories of chariots, offerings to gods, and even women named Golden Pomegranate. But perhaps the most dramatic decipherment unfolded in the jungles of Central America. For years, Mayan glyphs were dismissed as mere calendars or priestly doodles. Then, in the 1950s, a Soviet linguist named Yuri Norizov, working from wartime looted manuscripts, identified glyphs representing syllables. His work was ridiculed until a young American scholar, Linda Scheel, used his methods to decode the Palinc dynasty's history. Suddenly, stelae covered in art became political propaganda, boasting of wars won and rivals sacrificed. One glyph even recorded a queen's scandalous divorce. She left the palace, never to return. What unites these breakthroughs isn't just brilliance, but collaboration. Champollion built on the work of Thomas Young, who'd guessed that hieroglyphic symbols could represent sounds. Ventris corresponded with classicist Alice Kober, who'd painstakingly charted Linear B's symbol frequencies before her untimely death. Even Norizov relied on 16th century Bishop Diego de Landa's flawed but crucial notes on Mayan writing. Decipherment is a relay race, each scholar passing the baton forward. The methods themselves are as varied as the scripts. Some, like the Behistun inscription, a trilingual cliff carving in Persia, mirrored the Rosetta Stone's bilingual trick, unlocking Cuneiform. Others, like the Phaistos disc from Crete, still resist analysis because they lack a key. Modern computers now scan undeciphered scripts for statistical patterns, but as linguist David Stewart warns, algorithms can't replace intuition. When his team cracked Mayan numbers, it wasn't through software, but by noticing how glyphs for zero resembled shells, a visual pun in a culture that traded them as currency. The stakes go beyond academia. Deciphered scripts rewrite history. Linear B tablets proved Greeks existed centuries before Homer. Mayan glyphs revealed that their peaceful astronomer image was a myth. Their kings waged brutal wars. And every time a new script falls, like the recent partial decoding of Easter Island's Rongorongo, it's a reminder, writing isn't just about the past. It's a bridge to voices we're only beginning to hear. Long before the Iliad was etched onto papyrus, it lived in the breath of bards, sung in flickering firelight, shaped by memory and meter. Homer's verses weren't static lines on a page but living performances, shifting slightly with each retelling to suit new audiences. This fluidity was the heartbeat of oral tradition, where stories belonged to the community, not to parchment. The Celts took this further, outright rejecting writing for sacred lore, fearing that fixing words in ink would drain their power. Druids trained for decades to memorize laws and genealogies, believing spoken words carried a magic that written symbols could never capture. Yet when these traditions were finally transcribed, something paradoxical happened. Writing both preserved and transformed them. Take the Norse sagas. Passed down orally for centuries, they were eventually penned by Christian monks in Iceland, men who couldn't resist tweaking the tales to align with their faith. Odin's wisdom might suddenly echo biblical proverbs. Valkyries took on angelic overtones. The same happened with the Mahabharata, where scribes expanded the Hindu epic from 24,000 verses to over 100,000, layering in new philosophies and subplots. Writing didn't just record these stories, it fossilized particular versions, freezing what was once fluid. A bard might omit a king's disgrace to please his patron, but once inked, that disgrace became permanent history. Yet without writing, how much would we have lost? The Epic of Gilgamesh survived only because a Babylonian scribe pressed it into clay. Irish monks rescued Celtic myths from oblivion by scribbling them in Latin between psalms, often adding cheeky footnotes like, "This is what the pagans believed." Absurd, isn't it? Even Homer's epics gained new depth when written down. The repetitive epithets, a rosy-fingered dawn, swift-footed Achilles, once thought to be mere memory aids for bards, revealed intricate rhythmic patterns when seen on the page, like musical notation for the spoken word. The tension between oral and written traditions isn't just historical. Modern storytellers still grapple with it. West African griots recite ancestral histories unchanged for generations, yet their performances adapt to current events, weaving today's struggles into ancient frameworks. Indigenous Australian songlines, oral maps of the land, are now archived in digital libraries, raising questions about who owns a story once it's extracted from its living context. Writing can safeguard voices, but it can also silence the spontaneity that made them vibrant. Perhaps the most poignant example lies in the Americas, where Maya scribes painted codices with glyphs meant to be read aloud, their curves mirroring the cadence of speech. When Spanish bishops burned these books as heresy, they didn't just destroy texts, they severed a chain of oral performance stretching back millennia. Yet fragments endure, whispered by modern Maya elders who blend written glyphs with spoken ritual, proving that even in a world of ink, the human voice refuses to be silenced. The clash between oral and written traditions isn't a battle with winners and losers. It's a dance, one that keeps culture alive by letting it breathe in two rhythms at once. History often paints scribes as men bent over clay tablets or papyrus scrolls, recording laws and epics. But dig deeper and you'll find the quiet, determined strokes of women who refused to be silenced. Take Enheduanna, the high priestess of in 23rd century BC Mesopotamia, who didn't just copy texts, she composed them. Her hymns to the goddess Inanna, signed with her name in proud cuneiform, are the earliest known works attributed to a specific author, male or female. "You are the light, radiant in the heavens," she wrote, blending devotion with a poet's flair. In a world where most women's voices faded into anonymity, Enheduanna dared to say, "I was here." Half a world away, in Japan's Heian court, writing wasn't just a skill for women, it was an art form that defined an era. While men composed stiff official documents in classical Chinese, noble women like Murasaki Shikabu and Sei Shonagon wielded brushes to create masterpieces in vernacular Japanese. Murasaki's The Tale of Genji, often called the world's first novel, wove intricate tales of courtly love and political intrigue, while Shonagon's Pillow Book sparkled with witty observations. In life, there are two things which never lose their charm: a parade of priests and a lover's quarrel. Their works weren't mere entertainment, they were subtle rebellions, proving that women's writing could shape a nation's literary soul. Yet for every Enheduanna or Murasaki, countless women scribes remain nameless. In ancient Egypt, a rare tomb painting shows a woman named Ertaraus seated with a scribble palette, her title clear: Chief of the Weavers and Scribe. Was she an exception, or were there more like her, their contributions erased by time? Even in cultures that barred women from formal education, loopholes existed. Byzantine nuns meticulously copied religious texts, their hands preserving philosophy and science through the Dark Ages. A 9th century manuscript from Constantinople bears a marginal note in delicate script. The sinner Theodora wrote this, praying for forgiveness. Her sin, perhaps the audacity to pick up a pen. The obstacles these women faced were staggering. Sumerian school tablets mock female scribes as noisy interlopers. Medieval European convents sometimes required literacy tests to weed out unworthy novices, and yet they persisted. In China, Ban Zhao, a historian of the Han Dynasty, completed her brother's monumental Book of Han while advising empresses on statecraft. Her lessons for women, though steeped in the patriarchy of its time, became a classic proof that even within constraints, women could claim authority through ink. What's haunting is how fragile their legacy remains. The poems of Sappho, revered in antiquity, survive mostly in fragments burned by time and censorship. A single charred scroll from Herculaneum, unrolled with modern technology, reveals the handwriting of a woman philosopher named Philodemus, her words nearly lost to Vesuvius's ash. But every recovered scrap rewrites history. A recently deciphered Maya vase shows a noblewoman, Lady Kayable, holding a scribe's brush, her titles rivaling any king's. These women didn't just write, they redefined what writing could be. From the devotional verses of Hindu poet saints like Akka Mahadvi to the coded letters of Renaissance nun Arcangela Tarabotti, who raged against forced convents, their words were acts of defiance. So the next time you open a book, remember, the history of writing isn't just a chronicle of kings and conquests. It's also the story of a priestess in Ur, a lady-in-waiting in Kyoto, and countless others who pressed their voices onto the page, insisting against all odds on being heard. A stone tablet from ancient Sumer shows a crudely drawn ox head, the symbol for ox. Fast forward 4,000 years and you tap a cow emoji to text a friend about burgers. The journey between these two symbols might span millennia, but the impulse is identical: to convey meaning through images stripped down to their essence. Modern emojis, often dismissed as frivolous, are the latest chapter in writing's endless reinvention, proof that even in an age of hyperliteracy, we still crave the immediacy of pictures. Early writing systems leaned heavily on pictographs for good reason. A drawing of the sun could cross language barriers, just as a sun emoji signals hot or happy without translation. Egyptian hieroglyphs mixed such symbols with phonetic signs, much like how the fire emoji can mean literal fire, excellence, that concert was fire, or even attractiveness, he's fire. The difference: speed. Where a scribe might spend minutes carving a sun god's rays, you tap your screen in milliseconds. Yet both systems share a core truth: visual shorthand thrives when communication needs to be universal and fast. The rise of digital communication has accelerated this return to imagery. Texting's brevity mirrors the constraints of early cuneiform tablets, where space was limited and every wedge counted. Just as Sumerian scribes developed shorthand symbols for common words, grain, king, we've adopted emojis as emotional punctuation. A face with tears of joy replaces "that's hilarious." A red stands in for "I love you." Linguists call this language economization, the same drive that turned Latin into French or Old English into modern tweets. Even professional settings aren't immune. Workplace Slack channels buzz with thumbs up and light bulb hieroglyphs for the corporate age. But emojis aren't just pictographs too. They're a hybrid system blending old and new. The face with tears of joy emoji isn't a literal depiction of crying. It's a stylized symbol for laughter, much like how the Chinese character Chinese letter 0, laugh, evolved from a pictograph of a grinning face. And just as ancient scripts developed regional variations, compare Babylonian and Assyrian cuneiform, emojis can shift meaning across cultures. In China, the peach often symbolizes buttocks, while in Japan, the folded hand signifies please rather than prayer. Even skin tone modifiers echo how scribes adapted symbols for local contexts, a modern take on the Phoenician alphabet morphing into Greek and Hebrew. The real twist: emojis are pushing writing toward something ancient scripts never achieved: standardized global symbols. Unicode, the non-profit that governs emoji approval, functions like a digital King Sejong, deliberating over which icons make the cut. Recent additions are adult for disability visibility, are for British tea culture reflect societal values, just as new cuneiform signs emerged to document innovations like wheeled chariots. Critics argue this visual turn dumbs down language, but history suggests otherwise. When medieval scribes adopted punctuation to clarify texts, purists called it lazy. When 19th century newspapers used bold headlines for skimmers, literati sneered, yet both became indispensable. Perhaps the most fascinating parallel lies in abstraction. Early pictographs slowly shed their realistic forms, the ox head becoming the Phoenician aleph, then the Greek alpha, then our A. Emojis are undergoing the same evolution. The red no longer resembles an anatomical heart. The skull symbolizes dying of laughter more often than mortality. Like cuneiform's wedges or Chinese characters' strokes, these symbols are becoming conceptual rather than literal. The next frontier: dynamic emojis that respond to context, akin to how Mayan glyphs changed meaning based on adjacent symbols. So are we circling back to ancient ways? In part, yes, but with a digital twist, a text string mixing emojis and abbreviations. BRB toilet isn't so different from a Mesopotamian tablet blending pictographs and phonetic signs. Both compress meaning for efficiency, both rely on shared cultural knowledge. The difference is scale. Where a Bronze Age merchant might use 100 symbols, you have over 3,000 emojis at your fingertips. Yet the core challenge remains: how to balance clarity with expressiveness, tradition with innovation. Whether carved in clay or glowing on a screen, writing has always been a living thing, and its next chapter is still being drawn, one tiny picture at a time. In the quiet corners of Oxford's libraries, J.R.R. Tolkien wasn't just crafting stories, he was inventing civilizations, complete with languages that flowed like poetry and scripts as elegant as the elves who wielded them. His elvish Tengwar script, with its graceful curves and precise strokes, wasn't just decorative. It was a fully functional system, capable of recording everything from epic ballads to grocery lists. Tolkien, a linguist first and a novelist second, understood something profound. Writing systems aren't just tools, they're cultural fingerprints. Every swirl of Tengwar's letters reflected the ethereal beauty of the elves, just as the angular runes of dwarvish Khuzdul echoed their love of stone and craftsmanship. These scripts didn't merely exist to dazzle readers, they anchored Middle-earth in a tangible reality, proving that a world without its own writing is like a body without bones. But Tolkien wasn't alone in this alchemy of ink and imagination. Centuries earlier, Sequoia of the Cherokee Nation stared at the talking leaves of European settlers and saw not magic but a challenge. With no formal training, he single-handedly devised a syllabary of 86 characters, each representing a syllable in the Cherokee language. Within months, his people were reading newspapers in their own tongue, a literacy rate that soon surpassed that of their white neighbors. The difference between Tengwar and Sequoia's syllabary, one was born of myth, the other of necessity. Yet both share a truth: writing systems, whether fictional or forged in struggle, are acts of defiance against silence. Then there's Klingon, invented by linguist Mark Okrand for Star Trek. This guttural script with its sharp, aggressive glyphs became a cultural phenomenon. Fans didn't just learn it, they baptized their children in it, wrote operas in it, even translated Shakespeare's Hamlet into it. What began as a Hollywood prop evolved into a living language, complete with slang and regional dialects. Klingon's success reveals a paradox. Even the most alien scripts can foster real human connection. A tattoo of Klingon script on a fan's arm isn't just fandom, it's identity, a badge of belonging to a community that exists because someone dared to invent a way to write. Today is a good day to die. Yet constructed scripts aren't just playgrounds for linguists or nerds. Take Symbolics, a mid-20th century attempt to create a universal pictographic language for people with communication disorders. Or the Adinkra symbols of Ghana, which encode proverbs and philosophies into elegant motifs stamped on cloth. These systems remind us that writing isn't always about sound, it's about meaning distilled into form. When a child with autism uses Symbolics to express joy, or an Akan elder points to an Adinkra symbol meaning endurance, they're participating in the same tradition as Tolkien's elves or Sequoia's Cherokee, the endless human quest to make the invisible visible. The line between fictional and functional scripts blurs in unexpected ways. Logban, a logical language designed for AI research, has devotees who write poetry in it. The alien glyphs of Arrival's heptapods aren't just movie magic, they're based on real linguistic theories about non-linear time. And when fans of Game of Thrones learn High Valyrian on Duolingo, they're not just playing pretend, they're keeping a dead language, or rather, a never-alive one breathing. These scripts, whether born from a novelist's desk or a linguist's lab, prove that writing is more than communication, it's alchemy. Turn squiggles into symbols and suddenly you're not just speaking. You're conjuring worlds. Imagine a world where your thoughts appear on a screen before you've even lifted a finger, where an AI interprets your brainwaves and translates them into perfectly structured sentences. It might sound like science fiction, but we're already halfway there. From voice assistants drafting emails to predictive text finishing our thoughts, technology is reshaping writing faster than the transition from quills to typewriters. The digital age hasn't just changed how we write, it's redefining what writing even is. Emojis, GIF, and voice notes are elbowing their way into the space once reserved for carefully crafted sentences, sparking debates. Are we streamlining communication or sacrificing depth for speed? The keyboard, that clunky relic of the 19th century, is facing its first real competition. Voice-to-text tech, once notorious for garbling recognized speech into rec-a-nice speech, now transcribes with eerie accuracy. Apps like Otter, AI can distinguish between multiple speakers in a conversation, while Google's Project Relate helps people with speech impairments communicate in writing. But the real game changer, neural interfaces. Companies like Synchron are testing brain implants that let paralyzed patients type just by imagining handwriting. Suddenly, Cuneiforms read stylus, and the medieval scribes will seem like steps toward this moment, bypassing hands entirely to inscribe thought directly onto the digital page. Then there's AI's creative side. Large language models like GPT-3 don't just assist with writing, they generate entire articles, poems, and even code. Some artists are using AI to invent new scripts like the alien-looking glyphs of "this word does not exist," where algorithms dream up fake languages complete with grammatical rules. Could the next Cherokee syllabary or Tengwar script emerge from a machine's imagination? It's not far-fetched. In 2021, researchers at MIT trained an AI to design a functional writing system for a fictional culture. blending features of Korean Hangul and Mayan glyphs. The result was both familiar and utterly alien, like discovering a long-lost civilization's inscriptions. Yet for all its potential, digital writing has trade-offs. The average attention span for online content hovers around 8 seconds less than a goldfish's. Platforms like Twitter and TikTok reward brevity, pushing writing toward the fragmentary urgency of telegraphs. Critics warn we're losing the art of sustained thought, pointing to studies that show handwriting activates deeper cognitive processes than typing. But history offers a counterpoint. When Socrates lamented the invention of writing, fearing it would create forgetfulness in the learner's souls, he was critiquing what we now consider civilization's bedrock. Every leap from oral to written, scroll to codex, print to pixel has been met with alarm, only to birth new forms of creativity. The most radical shift might be in who or what gets to write. AI tools like ChatGPT can now draft legal briefs, news summaries, and even passable haiku. Artists like Rafik Anadol use machine learning to generate data sculptures where text morphs into swirling visual poetry. And in education, AI tutors provide real-time feedback on students' essays, teaching not just grammar but rhetorical flair. This raises thorny questions. If an AI writes a novel, who owns the copyright? If scripts can be algorithmically generated, does that dilute their cultural meaning? The answers might lie in collaboration rather than replacement. Think of AI as the modern equivalent of medieval scribes' marginalia, offering suggestions while humans steer the narrative. What's often overlooked is how digital tools are resurrecting ancient forms. Interactive fiction games like Disco Elysium blend text with player choice, echoing the branching narratives of oral storytellers. Apps like Notion let users organize thoughts in nonlinear webs, reminiscent of pre-linear writing systems like Aztec codices. Even the rise of dark academia aesthetics on platforms like TikTok, with its fetishization of handwritten journals and fountain pens, hints at a longing for tactile connection in a swipe-happy world. The future of writing isn't a zero-sum game between analog and digital, it's a mosaic. Cuneiform tablets coexisted with cylinder seals, illuminated manuscripts shared shelves with early printed books. Tomorrow might see neural-linked authors dictating novels to AI editors, while calligraphers craft bespoke invitations with ink made from crushed gemstones. The core impulse remains unchanged, to pin fleeting thoughts to something enduring, whether clay, parchment, or a blockchain. 5 millennia after Sumerian merchants pressed reeds into mud, we're still chasing the same miracle, to make the invisible visible and to ensure our voices outlast the moment they're spoken. Writing isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of humanity, pulsing through every era, every innovation, every whispered secret etched into clay or glowing on a screen. Think about it, those first wedge-shaped marks in Mesopotamia weren't merely receipts for grain. They were the spark that lit the fuse of history. Without writing, there'd be no libraries of Alexandria, no Declaration of Independence, no scientific revolutions scribbled in the margins of notebooks. Every scroll, every parchment, every pixel carries the weight of countless voices insisting, "I was here and this mattered." But here's the twist: writing isn't just about preserving the past. It's a mirror reflecting who we are and a compass pointing to who we might become. Consider how the printing press didn't just copy books, it democratized knowledge, fueling revolutions. Or how emojis, those tiny digital hieroglyphs, are reshaping communication in ways even Gutenberg couldn't predict. The story of writing is a story of reinvention. From quills to keyboards, from stone tablets to neural implants that translate thoughts into text. Each leap wasn't just technological, it was cultural, philosophical, even spiritual. Now, as we stand at the edge of a new frontier, AI crafting poetry, brain-computer interfaces bypassing fingers entirely, we have to ask, what's next? Will our tweets and TikTok captions be the cuneiform of tomorrow, studied by future historians trying to piece together our digital lives? Or will we invent something entirely unforeseen, a way of communicating that's as alien to us as a smartphone would have been to a scribe in Ur? The beauty of writing's evolution is that it's never finished. Just as the Phoenicians couldn't have imagined their alphabet birthing 1,000 scripts, we can't fully grasp where our tools will take us. But one thing's certain, as long as humans crave connection, as long as we're driven to say, listen, this is who I am, writing will adapt, endure, and surprise us. So what's your mark on this unspooling story? Whether you're journaling with a fountain pen or texting in emojis, you're part of the same grand tradition that began with a reed pressed into mud. Drop a comment below. What's your take on writing's future? And if you've loved this dive into the scripts that shaped the world, hit subscribe. History's mysteries are far from solved, and the next chapter's waiting.